Hey everybody, I'm back for another update on the Teardrop trailer build. I know it's been a while since you've seen any real progress. Hopefully I've gotten the video prior to this one uploaded by now, but what I'm doing today, and it's pretty much the last step in the trailer, as you can see the interior is finished, but I'm making some fenders to cover the wheels, so I'll show you what I'm working with and how I'm doing that. And hopefully this will be a nice little wrap up to the build. So thanks for tuning in. What I'm doing today is prepping these fenders. I got two sets of fiberglass fenders. They're 34 or 33, 34 Ford fenders from a gentleman off of Facebook Marketplace. Great, love Facebook Marketplace. And what I'm doing is they're contoured to the body of the car, so I'm using this pneumatic grinder, cutting them so that they sit flush against the side of the trailer. Sorry for the compressor noise, but you can see I've taped my line out, and I'm just cutting along that line. Fiberglass is messy business. You don't want it in your eyes, you don't want it in your lungs. I've got a mask and some goggles. If you have a respirator, that's even better. Definitely gloves. I'm wearing long sleeves, long pants. I hate fiberglass. It's just a mess. You don't want it on you. So I finished making my cut with the die grinder all the way down the side. It's going to sit nice and flush to the outside wall of the trailer now. The problem is it doesn't cover far enough onto the wheel, so what I'm going to do is make myself a wooden piece that basically closes up this gap all the way across. Stay tuned for that. Still not sure how I'm going to do it, but we'll do it. So as you can see right now there are no fenders on the trailer. I could have built it out over the wheels and had wheel wells instead, but I wanted the trailer to be a little bit narrower. So what I've got here, these are actually fiberglass fenders. They're reproduction fenders for a 34 Ford. And so you can see here this edge is not straight. And also they're not quite wide enough to cover. They come about out to here. Now in the state of Connecticut, you have to have the fenders covering the tire. So what I have to do is extend these. And I'm using some fiberglass to do that and build onto the outside, or the inside, excuse me, of the fender. Now this is the door side, or the passenger side fender, which I've already extended. What I did was I used some pool noodles and I cut them to length and taped them up, and that's kind of my jig to extend the fender outwards. And I'm layering fiberglass over, so I've got resin and a layer of fiberglass, and then what I did was I got some fiberglass body filler to level it out before I put the next layer of the glass mat on. Now this fender I had actually cut so that it was nice and straight and flush, which I think I'm not going to do on the other one because I really just have to rebuild out a lot of that material, so we're not going to do that on the next one. So what I'm using to do this is just a Bondo, a fiberglass cloth. I actually had to buy a couple more of these because it was going to take more than I anticipated, but just the same thing, fiberglass cloth. A Bondo fiberglass resin, you mix the hardener in and just brush it on. And then the filler is this fantastic glass. I was going to go with the Bondo, but that was like $6 cheaper, so you know, we're on a budget here. I'm going to mix up some of this resin. Comes with a little dish here. Pour the first part in. And then the hardener comes in a little tube. There is a specific mix ratio, but I just put a couple squirts in there. It's not really an exact science. So now that it's mixed, I'm going to take a cheap brush and I'm going to brush it on everywhere where there's going to be the fiberglass mat. I just want to get a little kind of base coat before I lay it on there so it's got something to stick to. And the mat just gets laid right on there. And then I'm going to do the same thing and brush over the top. So you can see I got my second layer of fiberglass over the top of that filler, and it came out fairly smooth. Something you want to try and make sure of, if you can help it, is to not have any kind of bubbles. There's a little bubble there. Anywhere where there's bubbles, it's eventually going to crack and maybe start to delaminate. And we don't want that, so we want to make sure that there's a couple bubbles there. But what I'm going to do is sand this all nice and smooth, and if any bubbles kind of open up, I'm going to fill them with that fiberglass filler and then sand that, and hopefully you won't even be able to see it. So we'll see how that does. Now I'm going to give this a couple minutes to set up. It cures up pretty fast. You've got a really finite amount of time to work with that resin, because it does start to kind of clump up, and you don't really want to keep brushing it on once it starts doing that. Once it starts to get, clumpy and gooey like that, it's gonna make a mess, and it's gonna be really hard to sand that out and get it nice and smooth. And now I know this side here looks really, really terrible, but don't worry, because it's all gonna get sanded down nice and smooth and flush. It's gonna be a nice straight edge all the way over, and then I'm going to use little L brackets to attach that to the side of the trailer. So it's going to look nice and flat and smooth eventually. Alright, so there it is. 2 layers of fiberglass with the filler in between. We're going to let that set for a while. I'm going to go inside. It's like 97 degrees today, so it's time for a break. And later on, once it's all dry and set up, we'll get it sanded down. Like I said, any kind of imperfections or bubbles or holes we'll fill in with some more filler, and we'll get those mounted onto the trailer. So I know that throughout this build there's been a couple of other do as I say, not as I do moments, and working with fiberglass is probably one of them. You should definitely have gloves. I just spent probably 5 or 10 minutes scrubbing the resin off of my hands, but gloves right now, the prices are through the roof, so I don't have them. It's unless you're working outside or in a space where there's really good ventilation, like a garage with the door open, a respirator is probably a good idea if you're using it inside. And maybe some eye protection if you're really slinging that stuff around, because it's kind of nasty. You definitely don't want to ingest it, inhale it, get it in your eyes, anything like that. So make sure you use some PPE and clean up pretty well when you're done. I'll talk about how this layering process went for me. So basically what I did was, you saw how I used the pool noodles to create my shape, and I went over it with this fiberglass cloth. This is kind of a really fine mesh setup, so I did a layer of that. Then I filled the divots with this glass filler, which spreads on just like Bondo. And then what I did on the inside was I did a layer of this. Now you can see this is a much coarser mesh. It's better for high strength applications. I don't know if I've got an unopened package of that anywhere, but it's the same thing. It's Bondo, but it's fiberglass mat instead of cloth. Got one fender here, 2 coats of the fiberglass mat, 2 coats of the fiberglass sheets, leveled out with the fiberglass filler and a coat of epoxy over the top. This one's got all the fiberglass mats and sheets, and the filler just needs to be sanded and epoxied. So this morning I'm actually getting the first coat of paint onto the newly widened fenders. So I'll show you what I'm doing there. Once I had all that done, I went over with the filler. This stuff is like 20 bucks at I got it at O'Reilly Auto Parts, but any kind of fiberglass filler should work. I went over with one of the rubber spreader knives like this one and just smoothed it out best I could. Gave it a light sanding to remove any high spots, and then I just brushed on some more of the resin just to kind of gloss over, fill in any of the divots. And then once this is set up, which shouldn't take very long, it's still a little tacky now, but that's okay. I'll hit this with a light sanding, just with some fine grit sandpaper, sand the whole thing, and then this one will be ready to paint. So they started out looking like this. Now this one I just coated with the resin, just one more coat to kind of smooth out any of the divots. Now they're not going to be perfectly smooth. I don't really want them to be perfectly smooth because I'd like them to look like they're kind of old and weathered. But this one, I've already done that, and I've started putting some paint on it. So I did a coat of black, and then I just did some areas of the edges with this burgundy, this maroon color here. And then I'm going to go over it with black, and then what I'm going to do is hit it with some light sandpaper and a couple of these edge spots so that some of that burgundy comes through and it almost looks like some fake weathering or something. We'll see how it comes out.